no words. I had the best words.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Best Words. This week, we're going to talk about economic statistics and, more importantly, the illiteracy of the media when it comes to economic statistics. So, what do I mean by that? Just the other day, the Bureau of Labor Statistics released their monthly job numbers, and it was a disappointing 210,000. And they all repeated this number as if it was gospel. But there's a deeper thing to look at here. So, the unemployment rolls were actually hitting record lows. We also had Black Friday sales that shattered all previous records. We also had a number of sales calls from a number of huge retail chains pointing out that they are actually staffed up to their needs. There was a number of economic statistics in the kind of galaxy of economic statistics that indicated that 210,000 was probably not accurate. Furthermore, just a month ago, the Bureau of Labor Statistics came out and said that they underestimated job growth for the middle of 2021 by like 600,000. So about 150,000 a month between May and September. And the problem here is, yes, the Bureau of Labor Statistics is having trouble in the post-COVID world. And yes, it's run by somebody from the Heritage Foundation, and I think they're probably not above suspicion. But that's really not the issue or what I'm trying to talk about here today. My issue is when not just Sean Hannity or Fox News takes a bad jobs number and doesn't put it into context. It's when NPR and the New York Times just say that's a disappointing jobs number. And it's like the media's job is not to say, okay, someone says it's raining and someone says it's not. The media's job is to go outside and see if it's actually raining or not. And that's what I would love to see from some of these so-called liberal media outlets, right? They are not, one, they're not liberal, and two, they're not putting things into context. So, I just mentioned at the beginning there a couple of reasons why they should have been incredibly skeptical of numbers that say 210,000 for the month of November. I am willing to bet everything I have that at some point in the medium-term future, revisions are going to come out, and that number is going to be at least 100,000 higher. For NPR, New York Times, none of these national outlets to even mention, these two phenomena. One, these stats don't make sense in the broader context of the economic statistics we're looking at. And two, revisions are not only common, they're incredibly frequent, and they happen all the time. And you would never know that, right? So if you're just a casual person listening to NPR, reading the New York Times or the Washington Post, you would think these numbers came out and, they're expecting 500,000 to 600,000. The number that came out was 210,000. And all the media just accept it as gospel. And there's just no deconstruction of whether or not this number is actually true. And I think that's a real shame. And it also fits this narrative, right? So this economic statistical illiteracy is part and parcel of a broader phenomenon. And that is that there is no liberal media bias. Because I remember during the Trump years, they often coded things in a way to make that administration look better. Here, they are taking bad news at face value without bothering to expend 1 ounce of their resources explaining why these numbers aren't actually accurate or probably aren't accurate. So I think this is a problem that has a couple different facets to it. One of them is the media is not particularly good at their job. They're good at covering clowns. They're good at covering spectacles. They are not good at placing data in a broader context and discussing whether or not that data actually makes sense. They're also not liberal in any meaningful way. The national media has been incredibly harsh on Joe Biden, and not just harsh, like the New York Times is actually getting a little touchy about it. The conservatives have worked the refs for years in the media. They have cried liberal bias, liberal media so much for so many decades now that the people who work in the media have internalized it and are quite literally afraid of treating conservatives fairly. To them, they have this standard of it's not objective truth that matters, it's both sidesism, right? And so they are so terrified of being unfair to conservatives that they are quite literally unfair to liberals. If you've watched my show or listened to this show for a long time, I'm not a huge Joe Biden fan. I'm definitely consider myself sort of 2/3 to the left of the median Democratic voter. But honestly, this economy is actually going pretty good. There's a lot to be proud of, and all you hear in the media is doom and gloom, doom and gloom, doom and gloom, and it's not really accurate. And the media is absolutely biased against telling a positive story right now about the economic facts on the ground. And the other economic fact on the ground that has absolutely sucked the oxygen out of the discussion is inflation.
That's my cue.
Sorry.
No, that's good. That's good. Yeah. So what do you think the reason is for them wanting to kind of just produce this kind of doom and gloom scenario? I think I have a pretty decent reason, is that they want to blame it all on the stimulus checks.
Ooh.
Of which we got 3, right? 2 under Trump, 1 under Biden. Now the first one for Trump was $1,200, and then we got a $600 if I'm a little hazy. Mm-hmm. I mean, most people did. And then we got the $1,400 under Biden, right? Because they were promising 2,000 before the elections, and then they added the 600 to the 1,400, and they were like, yeah, that's it. So I think a lot of the reason that this inflation stuff is going on is because these liberal media people, right? They want to push this agenda that giving stimulus to people is bad, and it causes inflation, and it causes prices to go skyrocketing through the roof. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think there's definitely something to that. I mean, it's also the fact that the people who are, the investor class is also the passive income class, and they don't care about anything but inflation, right? Because that's the only way to come at their money. And so they see government spending as inherently problematic due to the risk of inflation. And I think it's also that if you look at the media ratings just overall, like these media properties are doing terribly in the Biden years. Doom and gloom sells, if it bleeds, it leads. And I guess that goes for economics too.
That's true. Well, we are seeing prices go up on a lot of things. Decently, gas prices are back up. And a large portion of the reason for that is because of the pandemic, which is still ongoing. So they're trying to shift the focus off the pandemic and the supply chain issues that have been happening, which is causing these supply shortages everywhere, which is driving up the costs, which I think is mostly the driver of everything going up, including gas prices. But I'm not too sure. What's your take?
Well, yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, one, it's like, what is the story and how do we tell the story? How do we tell the story? So the story that the media is telling is that the supply chain problem is something that it's Biden's presidency, right? And I was alive in 2020, and you were alive in 2020, and I seem to remember, I was pretty close to the retail business. I seem to remember the supply chain issues being much worse during the Trump years than the Biden years. Supply chain issues are receding into the background because we know what was causing them. And yes, it was it's multifaceted, but just-in-time manufacturing has no slack in the system. There's really no ability to handle an external shock. On top of all that, you had demand jump from all, modern lows in 2020 to modern era highs in 2021. And the system was simply not able to keep up. One of the things that I talk about a lot over the years, really there's 2 things that I kind of always circle back to. I'm a two-hit wonder, if you will. One is that the Senate is terrible, and 2, and that is that the American exceptionalism is terrible for reasons that no one talks about. And here's what I'm going for here. Inflation is a global problem right now, but if you listen to anyone in the media, right or left, you'd never know that. You'd never know that. Is it about the spending bill? Is it about the stimulus checks? Is it about monetary policy? It's not actually, it's nothing to do with Washington, D.C., or precious little to do with Washington, D.C. If anyone who's followed international economics for decades, Japan has been suffering deflation. The Japanese have been trying to get some inflation because deflation is worse for your economy. And now Japan is seeing record inflation they have not seen literally in 40 or 50 years. The EU has very high inflation. So it's not just, your sort of traditional culprits of Argentina or whoever. Everywhere is seeing inflation, including places like Japan and Germany that traditionally have very low inflation. And so this notion that it's something happening because of the Fed or because of Joe Biden or because of stimulus checks is just really misguided in an extremely kind of arrogant American way to view the world or not view the world. It's honestly like the world doesn't revolve around Washington, D.C., not nearly as much as we think, the economic world especially. And so I think it has nothing or very little to do with U.S. federal policy and a lot to do with global supply chain trying to keep up and all these shortages.
Well, yeah, I agree with you completely. I think that the narrative that the media is making is, coming from a neoliberal kind of perspective, right? They want to take any chance they can to focus on how, unemployment benefits were higher and things like that, and stimulus checks, and, if we give money to people or if we help people out, then things just get more expensive and nobody's gonna be able to afford it anyway. It's a very like Republican and conservative kind of talking point. But these people kind of intersect in, I'd say, goals because of the neoliberal establishment of the media and the people that fund them, their donors. They don't want to see people given stimulus checks over and over again. They don't want to see unemployment, being generous when people lose their jobs. They want this kind of dog eat dog, survival of the fittest social Darwinism to keep chugging along like it has been for the last 30, 40, 50 years,
No, exactly. Like one would think, given that the kind of supplemental unemployment we saw, the red states got rid of that and they said, you watch, there'll be no labor shortage. Everyone's going to get back to work. And it turns out, there was literally statistically zero effect from supplemental unemployment benefits on labor market participation. Those of us on the left were saying the whole time, this actually has no bearing on it whatsoever. Watch. And we were right. And you would never know that from consuming mainstream, quote unquote, liberal American media, that the conservatives were completely discredited in their arguments about what was causing these things. Right. And if we want prices to come down in the food space, there's a real easy way to do that. And that's let people in this fucking country. I find it really frustrating when people on our side, from the White House on down, buy in completely to conservative framing on immigration. They say, look, illegal crossings are down under Biden. And it's like, you know what? If you really cared about price levels in this country and the labor shortage, if you can't make it easier for people to immigrate here, the very least you could do is look the other way when they do. And there's no one left. Like,
yeah, our birth rate is kind of low. We're not as low as some European countries in Japan. They're in a real pickle right now. But you get to that threshold where you can't replace the population that you have because your birth rate's so low. You kind of need people to come in the country to do the jobs that, a lot of people won't do.
You do. I mean, the baby boomer age, if you look at an age pyramid of the United States, it's just a huge number of Americans are retired or are about to retire. The idea that if we just cut unemployment benefits to the bone, we're going to see, like, there's just no one there. These mystery people who are just sitting home waiting for these jobs, they don't exist. Right. The only people who aren't working right now are people who are, too wealthy or retired and don't care. People who have childcare needs that can't be met if they work, or people who are not emotionally or intellectually capable right now. That's it. There's nobody out of a job right now.
And it goes back to your job support thing too. A lot of, maybe, if that number isn't as far off as we think it is, but a lot of people just don't want to take these shit jobs now. I wouldn't take a shit job. You're going to work at McDonald's for $15, like less than 15 an hour. If you can't live off the job that you're working, why even bother? So, I mean, a lot of people are probably just moving in with family, living off their savings and stuff like that, and just waiting for wages to go up and stuff like that. There's not much of a point if you're going to have to work a job and it's not going to fulfill your needs completely. Really, what is the point?
Yeah, and I fully welcome this reexamination of priorities that people have.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of jobs are pretty shitty. Not all of them. I've had some good ones, but yeah, bad jobs are terrible. And to be mistreated by the public in the age of COVID is no fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just really have one more point about inflation. And this isn't going to win me any friends in the White House, but I don't give a shit. And here's what I mean by that. Like, if you give everybody $1 million stimulus, yeah, you're going to have wild inflation, right? But that's not what happened. We have lived in a world, our generation has lived in a world where tuition and rent, the two biggest, tuition, rent, and healthcare, the three biggest, line items on anyone's budget under 40, have increased consistently year on year on year. Tuition's up like 300% since the late 90s. Rent's up like 500% in some places more. Healthcare is up 3x, 4x, right? This idea that inflation is new to millennials, which the New York Times actually ran an article saying inflation is new to millennials. No, the things that we care about have gone up nonstop since we were teenagers. And no one did a damn thing about it. And, for various statistical economic modeling reasons, things like rent and tuition and healthcare are pulled out of what they call the core inflation, right? But prices have been going up well ahead of inflation for the things that our generation has spent all their money on for our entire lives. And now that milk and gas have gone up $1 a gallon, we're supposed to fucking stop the world until we solve this problem? Sorry, I don't care. I don't drive and I don't drink milk and I don't give a shit. Like, no one did anything about rent. No one did anything about tuition. No one did very much about healthcare costs, but God forbid the price of gas goes up $1 a gallon and the whole world has to come to a grinding halt. Fuck it. I don't care.
I don't think you're wrong completely about that. No. It's kind of like the frog in the boiling pot, you're right. All of these things have been going up substantially for the last 40 or 50 years, and we're supposed to all of a sudden care about a 50% increase, a 50-cent increase in like a gallon of milk. I'm like, okay, whatever, man. I think it's all a ruse. They're, shifting the goalposts in order to, again, I think focus on the fact that they don't want to give people stimulus checks and things like that. They don't want the government providing services to people. And their argument is because it causes inflation. And they're just shifting, what's happening right now. They're trying to shift the blame onto that instead of the things that have been going on in this country for a really long time, which is basically Reaganism, Reagan economics, the destruction of the government, the destruction of the welfare state and the safety net. And that's the real problem, not gas going up and down, $2 here and there. Next year it's probably going to be $2 again. It's bullshit. And I'm sorry.
100%.